Okay, I think we're live. Hi, Haribol, everyone. Welcome back to our second podcast at the Bhaktizoom server team. We're really excited, and today we're going to be speaking about something that is probably a really difficult subject matter in terms of actually being able to balance a life of bhakti and also trying to balance the worldly duties that we have to carry out also. And we have a really special guest with us, Sriman Mukunda Prabhu, who would like to introduce. Hare Krishna, Mukunda Prabhu, how are you?
Dandavat, Didi, I am good.
Good. Thank you so much, firstly, for joining us on this program. I really appreciate it. Mukunda Prabhu, I could introduce you, but I prefer if you'd would speak a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your background of how you came to Krishna consciousness, what you were doing before, and then we can go from there. Is that okay?
Oh, so it's always embarrassing if you have to speak about yourself or even hear about yourself. That's part of the nature of devotional culture, I think. But I think when I was young, we had an uncle who came to live with us. And actually, I always do this, so I'll do it now again. This is a picture of my uncle. And this picture was taken back in the early 50s. And he came to live with us and he taught yoga. And he was a practitioner of Kriya Yoga and a disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda. So it was sort of Mayavad philosophy, but when we were young kids, we would watch him perform his asanas and pranayam, and when he would go to work, we would sneak into the room and look at his little index cards, and he had all these things written on there like Paramatma and all these, we didn't know what it was. But when I was a little bit older, my older brother, he encouraged me that we should all study yoga with my uncle. So that was, started out as a kid, maybe 10 or 11, we were doing that. And then as I got a little older, natural interest came in sports and girls and all the other things. But my brother still insisted that we had to do the yoga thing with him. So over the course of time, me and my uncle became really close though. And he, long story short, as I got older, a little bit older, he became a little interested in Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita. So this is around 1972. And he was very introverted, so he would not like to speak to people. And he asked me to call the ISKCON temple that was in Brooklyn and find out about the Mosala Leela of all things. So I called the temple and we didn't know what Mosala Leela was, so we just said the Mosala Leela. And the devotee on the phone was really kind. He said, what is that? So then I said, it was when Krishna passed away. He said, well, we don't talk about that on the phone, but if you come to the temple, we have a whole array of books we can give you and many things are explained. So my uncle gave me $50 US dollars and got a taxi, which was, they were called gypsy cabs back at that time. They were the equivalent of Uber. And I went to the temple, had the cab wait, went in, got the books, prasadam, and a small lecture from that devotee. And I came back and gave my uncle the books. And we started reading them from there. And I decided to return to the temple that following Sunday for the Sunday feast. And it started from there and it just sort of evolved. And then my uncle grew from his attraction to the teachings in Self-Realization Fellowship to bhakti. And so he kept encouraging me, go to the temple, bring more books. And, then by the time I was out of high school, I decided to go into the military. So I went into the military, but it was during the Vietnam War and they were allowing people to leave early because it was near the end of the war. And so I had a great yearning to live in the ashram. So when I came back home, I had my GI Bill, which you get in America to go to college. So I went to college and then I said, no, I'm going to join the ashram. So I just left everything, went out to Los Angeles, joined the ashram, and I was in the ashram for about 6 months, and I got a letter from the government saying, listen, if you don't register for the next semester in school, we're going to cut your stipend. So I had to go back to school, so I went back to college, everything. And then afterwards, long story short, I decided, I had a very good career in music at the time, but I decided that, ashram life and bhakti was important for me. So I joined the ashram again and sold all of my instruments this time. And in 1979, I was sent to Africa to preach, to open temples. So I went to West Africa and started temples in Africa. I stayed in Africa for 8 years preaching, came back to the US. And when I came back, I had to find some way to make a living. So of all things, I joined the police department because I didn't want to really go back to playing music full time because it wasn't as stable and it just requires so much socialization that wasn't healthy for bhakti. So, I played music sort of on the side and also had a job in law enforcement. And I did that until I retired in 2006. And actually once asked Gurudev, because Gurudev would always inquire for me, how is your work? So, near the end of my career, I worked in anti-terrorism, which was really heavy thing. And Gurudev, how is your work? And I would say, oh, Gurudev, it's really hard. And Gurudev looked at me and said, I was a police officer also, but I never forgot Krishna. So it was like that was the key thing, So then anyways, we retired and my good wife, she was a dentist and she had her own practice. And when I retired, she sold her practice and we moved to Florida, and Gurudev had given us instructions to travel, to preach, and to do seva like that. So that's what we're doing to this day.
Well, I just want to say that you guys are doing an amazing job. I always, when I'm listening to you guys, it's always an inspiration. And I always feel like, okay, yeah, I feel encouraged that I can do something. So I'm very appreciative of you following Gurudev's instructions. Prabhuji, what we want to, because the subject is spiritual life versus worldly duties. And, you explained in when you were speaking about your kind of pastimes so far, that you kind of were in during work and also you had this glimpse of kind of solely focusing on bhakti, and you left the worldly duties kind of, should I say in quote, to join the ashram and then went back, etc. So how did you find that? Like, because I'm speaking out of my experience, like when I'm working, I find it really difficult to shift between the two. So it's either I'm fully there in my work, or I'm fully in bhakti. So it's kind of like, and a lot of people I find that find it difficult to balance the two. So what would you say your experiences are of trying to find that balance?
Well, of course, in the first instance, I was younger and I joined the ashram full time. So there was a sort of dedicated focus on growth in bhakti. And then I came back into the secular world to finish school and everything, and then started working. But from that time, it was also a realization that there had to be some kind of synthesis, some kind of balance between the two things. I had always continued to study and to read, and there was one verse that very much stood out to me that Mahaprabhu mentioned, which was Antra Nishtakara Bayalokya Vyavyahar, that internally we should always be very absorbed in bhajan life. And Srila Gurudev sort of reiterated that to me practically when he described his former Acharya Leela as a police officer and so forth and so on, but how he always stayed focused on Krishna. So internally, we should always have bhajan life going on in the Hridoya Mandir, means the heart temple. And Bayalok Vyavyahara, this is the part that's usually difficult to try to navigate, which is that to the external world, we have to deal with it appropriately. And appropriately means we have to recognize that there is a myriad of people in different levels of consciousness. So it's not like we can translate our worldview and bhakti and everything into the whole secular space. It doesn't happen. Rather, the secular space will have its own sort of influence. We just can't let that influence touch the Hridoya Mandir. Just like we have certain restrictions about who can come into a temple, not based on physical things, but like if you are in an unclean condition, you can't go on the altar or something, right? So in the same way, Aridoy Mandir is like a sacred space. It means a heart temple. It's like a sacred space. And we can't let the external influences enter that space. But for instance, I would get up in the morning because I worked a morning shift on the police department, and I had to be there at 6 o'clock. So I would get up like 3:30. I would do my Mangal Arati at 4, but I would chant and everything, and do Mangal Arati, chant my Anik, do everything. And then I would go to work. Now, when I arrived at work in police department, I'm just giving an example, every job is different, but we would have a morning meeting where they go over all the crimes of the previous night and all of that. And while I'm sitting next to my colleagues and partners, they would talk about every form of mundane life that was available, right? And I didn't find myself in a bhakti versus material life. I just found myself in baya lok vyavyahar, dealing with the material appropriately. Oh, did you see the game last night? Oh, no, I missed it. Oh yeah, this and that. Oh, really? You know, and just dealing with the material appropriately, but internally, what I had read that morning, what was, part of my shwadhyay for the day, that was resonating in my heart. And that sort of dual consciousness had to become a mainstay because I had to find some way to pragmatically deal with living. And at the same time, you certainly cannot give up your bhajan life. So we can't really develop the dichotomy mentally of material life versus bhakti or material life versus spiritual life. There has to be some synthesis.
Yeah, because one of the things that I have heard, and I've been asked questions regarding it, and I know that so many other people have asked, is that what can I do during my day to make my life a little bit more Krishna conscious, even though I'm surrounded by material people. Let's say, I say material people, but speaking about other things apart from Krishna. And sometimes you are put into a position where everyone else around you is not Krishna conscious, and you are the only person that is. Now, what would you recommend for someone that is in that position, that they're alone at work, for example, with hundreds of people around them that are not Krishna conscious? And maybe they've just started Krishna consciousness. That's part of the process.
Well, it depends, because a lot deals with the maturation level in bhakti. If devotee is very new, obviously it will be more difficult. If there is some background, some sanskars have more deeply developed, some impressions more deeply developed in the heart, then the resonance of your bhakti practice and your bhajan life will resonate internally. So the external atmosphere will not be as prominent in its influence, right? Now, Bayalok Vyavyahar again, if I'm working a particular job, there's some concentration required in the execution of that job. If it's computers, if it's police work, if it's music, whatever it might be, there is some degree of execution that has to be there for that job to be done properly. So part of the focus will be to that. And that is also a way of averting a lot of superfluous conversation and sort of nonsensical Mayic stuff that goes on, right? So that's part of it on a practical level. Secondly, I found that very quickly when I got to know my colleagues at work and so forth, I did not compromise what was my life to accommodate being vyavyaharik in my dealings, right? I didn't suddenly say, okay, I'll go and eat with you guys at the meat eating restaurant or something. I actually said, hey, listen, you guys drop me at what we have a market here called Whole Foods Market, right? And it's basically where you can get stuff and it's fruit and vegetables, what have you. So I say, hey, drop me here and I'll meet you guys after we take morning meal, right? Or after we take breakfast or whatever, because I can't eat here. Oh, what? You can't eat here? Oh yeah, I don't eat meat. I don't eat fish. I don't eat eggs, right? So, and this is just, it's who I am, right? But I'm doing the job the same way you are. So, and over the course of time, because I was never standoffish or things that would create a imbalance in the natural relationship, a friendship develops. So it got to a point when I first started to work, I used to carry a little counter to work to chant because I was working in a uniform and everything, so I couldn't. Once, by the grace of Guru and Krishna, I was transferred and I went to a place where I didn't have to wear a uniform, but I wore regular secular clothes to work. First a suit and tie, then I went to the Special Operations Division. So I used to wear jeans and stuff like that because we worked, narcotics and all these things. So after a while, I would actually take my bead bag in the morning because I chant my rounds in the morning, but I would take my bead bag and put it in my backpack and I would go to work with it. And it got to a point where those colleagues I had who had known me now over the course, let's say of a year, 2 years, whatever, they would ask me in the morning, hey, did you finish your prayers? And I would say, yeah, I have a couple of rounds. All right, let's go to the park first. You can finish your prayers and then we'll all go to Whole Foods and eat, right? Like that. So just over the course of time, the influence from being sort of more organic and not being very, I'm this super spiritualist type of person, right? A natural organic friendship develops because I'm being Vyavyaharik. I'm not, people tell, hey, my daughter graduated. Oh, that's very good. Really good. Oh yeah, what did she go to college? And you know what I mean? So that natural organic sort of friendship, at the same time, what's deep in my heart, resonating about my Swadhyaya in the morning from Jiva Goswami's Sandarbha or whatever, right? Is like, it's like those two kind of worlds. But because I'm able to navigate Vyavyaharically in a nice way, they start to accommodate that. And that friendship that they have then give some sukriti to them because it's related to bhakti.
Yeah, it's really interesting actually, because when you meet, well, I can only speak about my experience and those that have been around me, so I won't name names, but it's really interesting because when you you try to kind of hide your Krishna consciousness for some reason. I don't know whether everyone's faced that or not, but when you first initially start, there's some apprehension about saying, oh, I'm Krishna conscious, or I'm following Krishna consciousness and whatever. And then as I think what happens is as time goes on, you become a bit more confident in the fact that, and you're a bit more established in yourself and your Siddhanta with Krishna consciousness, that you start to go, actually, it doesn't matter if someone doesn't stop talking to me or not, because I'm following the practice. And actually, majority of the time, in my experience, is that if I've been honest about me being who I am, people are much more accepting than me trying to falsely say, nah, I just don't want to spend time with anyone that is not Krishna conscious, because you can learn a whole load of things from people that are not Krishna conscious, in the sense that you start to see things from a different perspective, that, oh my God, Krishna really is saving me. That, you start to see these kind of differences in life, and when someone else is kind of listening in on that, they for some reason are inquisitive about it. There's no reason for them to be, and they could be the total opposite to someone that is Krishna consciousness, but they have some inclination towards it because you're being honest. And I think honesty is something that is really predominant in accepting who you are and of being Krishna conscious, I think. What would you say to someone that is brand new to Krishna consciousness and is a little bit shy of showing that they are following this path? Because I think there's a stigma attached to those in the West, that is, not so much in or the West, the East even, should I say, more accepting here to some degree. But in the West, it's kind of like, oh, they're just the crazy people that go out on the streets and chant Hare Krishna. And so some people are very shy of saying that actually that's who I am actually. But not all of us go out on the streets and chant, or not all of us do that, because that's not all of our seva. So what would you suggest to someone that is starting their path in Krishna consciousness and just needs to kind of work out how to balance the two?
I think it's always going to be a little more difficult if you're very new to bhakti, because there's the sort of self-confidence issues with navigating being around people who consider Krishna consciousness to be some kind of weirdness. So there's going to be that natural self-apprehension around presenting yourself as, you know, one of those people per se. But a lot has to do also with your ability to present yourself in whatever field that you're in competently. So if you are a medical professional, if you are a professional of any sort, your ability to present yourself in that field gives some credence to how people see you. So, you know, if you are, let's say, you know, as a musician even, which was another part of my career, if somebody calls and I'm able to go in and do a great job with the music, whether it's a recording or if it's a live show, whatever the case is, their first appreciation comes, oh, that guy's a really good percussionist. He's a good percussionist. From that, there's a natural sort of appreciation for your professionalism in a particular craft. Now, from that, their view of you is different. So if you then start to present that, you know, well, yeah, I don't eat meat. Oh, what? You don't eat meat? Is there a religious reason or health reason? No, it's part of my religious tradition. Oh, what tradition are you in? And a whole natural unfoldment takes place, but from the platform of having respected you as the professional in a particular craft. So, I mean, a lot has to do with how you present yourself in the external arena as well. So that, and then it becomes more easy for them to digest that not everybody who participates in the Krishna conscious sociological movement, the Krishna conscious movement, all does the same thing. You have everything from doctors and lawyers to those who live ashram life. So, and even those who are living outside of ashram life and are professionals may participate in that street Sankirtan that you saw, right? But, you know, now you have more ability to explain the diversity and the sort of natural condition of Krishna consciousness as a sociological phenomenon. It's not just everybody's homogenous, everybody's the same. No, you have all kinds of people, but this is a spiritual practice. And it gives opportunity to explain why they're on the street, what they're chanting, what they're doing. So now what was awkward turns into a unique preaching situation. Now, that's not going to be as easy for somebody who's brand new because they're going to have to conquer sort of the self, you know, esteem issues around presenting themselves as something that people don't think is normative, right? So they have to conquer that first. But after that, and again, what's going to help with that is how well you present yourself in whatever field you're in, because that automatically gives you a certain kind of ability to be appreciated. Oh, wow, they're an excellent medical professional, right? And from that point of view, and that's why Gurudev used to encourage, if you're going to school for something, Gurudev would say, be a great whatever that is, right? So that you can represent Krishna consciousness well.
Yeah, and you can hear on many morning walks that I think someone asked him a question about Krishna consciousness, and they were being very passive aggressive towards Gurudev's kind of the movement itself. And Gurudev said, well, it's not that I haven't got PhD students with me or doctors and so forth, engineers. He was starting naming all of the people that are surrounding him, and you know, he was like, everyone here is like, you know, someone from a scientific background and they still believe in Krishna conscious, and it gives Gurudev a really good stepping stone to kind of go, actually, it doesn't matter, because we've got some really good, phenomenal preachers that are like, you know, NASA experts and science experts, and it's mind-blowing because, you know, everyone has this misconception that if you're a scientist, you don't believe in God at all, and we've got the best, and, you know, ISKCON have got some amazing, like, learned people, and you know, if you look at how the way that they preach is by example also. So Gurudev, and you know, so many are following that line to be an expert, so that they can just show that actually you can be an expert in something, but it's still Krishna consciousness, and Krishna is the center of that consciousness.
Yeah, and it's important. One thing, it's also important for devotees even who are not in some quote professional occupation, so to speak. If you work at a grocery store, or if you do deliveries, or whatever it is you do, you're still, you know, a person of value. And externally, as soon as people are able to appreciate that from an external point of view, it gives leeway kind of naturally to accepting whatever it is you do spiritually or internally as having more substance. And also if you don't compromise what it is you do.
Yeah.
So if you don't try to become overly absorbed in masking the fact that I'm a devotee, or masking the fact that Krishna, obviously, you know, I was going to work, I was in a uniform. Even when I got my job, the first thing they said is, hey, you got to cut the ponytail thing. Right? Right? Because, you know, obviously on the police department, the first couple of years you're in a uniform. So, you know, he says, oh, you can't wear, you know, that can't stick up above your uniform shirt, and you got to cut your ponytail. Now, when I went to special operations, first thing I did was grew my Sika back, right? And I had my beads on. Because, you know, the special operations division, that wasn't such a big thing.
Yeah, it's interesting how you can be, how many Krishna conscious people there are that are not actually showing them. I remember being at work one day and I was just, someone saw my tulsi mala because I've never taken them off. Guru them to me, and they said, oh, you're Krishna conscious, are you from ISKCON? And I was like, no, I'm not from ISKCON, but I'm from Gaudiya Math. And oh, really? Like, that's so interesting. I'm also Krishna, blah, blah, blah. And I said, oh, why don't you wear tulsi mala? She said, oh, it's just not a corporate environment kind of thing. And I said, but, you know, this is going to protect you, this corporate environment. And we got into a really big discussion, and it was actually a really nice discussion. We formed a really nice friendship. And she started to wear a tulsi mala again. But I was like, be shy of who you are, people will accept you. And you know, actually more people stop me because of my tulsi mala, because they think it's cool, or they are what it is. Or if it's strangling me, that's one of the main ones that they go, is that not strangling you? And I'm like, no, space. But someone stops me because of my tulsi mala and says, what is that? It's just a really platform. And I think there's certain key things that if you're able to show subtly, can help you in finding that confidence. Because once someone asks you one thing about Krishna consciousness, you feel encouraged to do something more, and it's like a reverse thing. So it's both ways. It's like they're getting something, but also you're feeling some type of way to want to show more that you're Krishna consciousness, and you're Krishna conscious, should I say, or you're actually in the path of that. So Prabhuji, there's some people that start Krishna consciousness and they are in a household where everyone around them is totally against you going into Krishna consciousness, and they say that, you know, it's a cult, you're going to turn into a sannyas. I mean, Indian people say this a lot, that you're going to turn into sannyas, you're going to leave home, and then those that are not Indian bodied, they may get questioned about, you know, a cult that is taking you away from normal civilization, etc. What would you say to those people that are facing those situations at home, like how to overcome it, because they're living in that environment where it's not so favorable, but they're trying to maintain what is prescribed in the duties of maintaining their relationships, etc. Even though internally they may be developing. But what would you say for those that are facing that on a bodily platform?
Every situation is going to be unique, because every situation has a history for one. You know, for instance, if the person is a little younger and the parents have seen, like, you know, sort of the normal progress through sort of teenage life and veering off into various things, they might consider this is just another one of those, you know, sort of journeys into, you know, sort of mental teenage life or something. So the age is a factor, history is a factor. But if a person has become serious, then the ability to affirm your position of why you're doing what you're doing, and consistency will be the two things that will bear out or validate your stance. In other words, if you can substantively explain what it is about Krishna consciousness that you're attracted to. Also, whether or not you're going to end up as a sannyasi or just go off into brahmachari life, never get married, whatever, right? That's always yet to be seen, because we have to see what happens down the line. But the idea of it being able to explain that Krishna consciousness is, again, not a sort of homogenous group of people, but there's diversity from married families who, though they may have started in ashram life, evolved to grihastha life and are living successfully in grihastha life, etc. So it's not like one size fits all. So that's the first thing. Krishna consciousness is not a one size fits all thing. And my basic approach to maybe moving to living in an ashram is for the ability to, in a concentrated way, imbibe both the culture and the teachings and the lifestyle. And that's why I'm making this kind of decision. Now, obviously, the ability to have the oratory skills to explain all this kind of stuff, maybe in a hostile environment where everybody from grandma to mom to everybody else is coming down, that may not be that easy. So again, it's always going to be circumstance dependent, because every circumstance is different. But that's still going to be the foundational key to successfully being able to navigate, is your ability to affirm your position. Like my parents, they both were extremely happy that I had taken to Krishna consciousness. They just thought, well, I mean, we've seen, we've seen life prior to that, right, in various iterations. And, I can say here, we don't find any of the negative things that could become prominent among a lot of people: drugs, bad relationship, becoming, abusive in some way, form, or fashion of yourself or others. So they didn't see any of those things. So they said, well, whatever it is spiritually that allows you to live a lifestyle that's void of those things, that can't be bad. Now, of course, I was about 21 at the time that I actually made solid decisions to move into an ashram and all of those things. So I was an adult, for one. And I had already, like I said, gone into the military and other things. So there was a sense of some kind of level of responsibility. So my mom didn't really question it like this is a rash decision and so forth, so on. Now, my earlier, because I had two sort of music careers, in the earlier music career, it was somewhat successful also. Both were successful. So my mother did question, well, wait, now, now you're making it in music. This is a hard thing to do, in America especially. So why are you suddenly, making a choice? But I'm not doubting if this is a sincere decision you have. I'm not doubting it, but why? So again, I explained, because, I'm at a level of unfoldment in my life where this is very important to me. And I have not proven historically in my adult life, so to speak, that I've been irresponsible. So she had to say, well, look, looking at everything, you went in the military, you took responsibility, right? You went to school. So I have to trust that what you're doing is something that you truly have evolved to, and it's not something that's, just fly by night. You understand? And that's going to be, and that's why I said it's always individual, because if you have a history like that, you can't expect parents to then say, oh, I completely co-signed it. Yeah, I mean, the time that you decide you want to be a clown in the traveling circus, or the time that you wanted to do this other wild thing or that thing. And so now you want to go off and be a sadhu, right? So, so history is big, and we have to accommodate that. Now, if you're sincere, you have to also respect and accommodate that my history will play a part in how I'm viewed when I take a decision like this,
And do you think sometimes, I don't know if you've ever come across this, where someone uses the concept of leaving their home for Krishna consciousness to do something totally opposite to Krishna consciousness, and it's a way of escapism for them, because they don't want to be in the environment that they're in, so they naturally go and join the ashram or a home where there's devotees, and it's rather than actually facing that situation at home. They're leaving that environment completely to escape from that problem rather than actually for Krishna consciousness. Does that am I making sense on that question? Probably not.
Yeah, no. It's true. And then therefore we have to understand Bhagavad Gita says that 4 types of people approach Krishna. So if it has been out of some distressful condition, whether it be at home, whether it be the search for sort of life freedom, so to speak, that I want to be able to express myself, not necessarily in Krishna consciousness, but the strictures at home make it so that I'm looking for something to get out of what's going on at home. That could very well be. And actually a lot of devotees may have initially come from the idea of, I'm going to get out of my home situation and I'm going to join something where I can at least have facility to live, right? And I may want to have exploration of other things which may not even be healthy. But having come in contact with devotees, naturally the sukriti fal, the pious fruits of that create a samskar. Now, whether or not that samskar, depending on their previous lives, everything is strong enough that once they get to the life of devotees and around devotees, it's enough to nourish them to stay and give up the, sort of frivolous ideas they may have had. That's to be discovered. But there's many, the 4 basic reasons why people may come to bhakti, and that's one of them, that they're escaping something that they consider distressful or whatever the case is. Now, hopefully, it's always the hope that once coming in contact with devotees, there's enough samskars there, previous bhakti samskars, that again, they will be captured by their previous samskars and they'll be able to hold on there. What that will do was then give the parents or whatever their previous condition was, a view of Krishna consciousness as being a saving mechanism for them. So their appreciation of Krishna consciousness will grow as well. Now, of course, if they go to Krishna consciousness, then leave and get caught up in a lot of other frivolous activities, the parents is always going to be, I told you so. And normally, the karmic fallout from that is that you'll end up back home, right? Because if it's really truly something frivolous and not substantial, the ability to maintain it, right? Because irresponsibility is part of frivolous life, will kick in and it's hard. And then you end up having to go back home.
Yeah.
So.
So how can someone that is let's go with someone that started Krishna consciousness, because for someone that is already in Krishna consciousness or have started it are going into that alley, there's many different conversations we can have, but let's go with someone that started Krishna consciousness. They're living in an environment at home where their parents are they're a bit against it, but they're not totally against it, but they just don't. I like the idea of it that being done in front of them. Any Krishna conscious stuff. How can someone strengthen their relationship with Krishna so that they can start to not have a negative impact rather a positive one, where it eventually doesn't matter what they've done in the past, that eventually it becomes a positive outcome for both the person that's living in that place as well as that they're surrounded by. What would you recommend for some?
That may not always be possible, because it may have to come to a point where it can be seen that there is something that creates reconciliation of the opposite opinions about it, right? So first of all, whether or not the person who's under distress in that environment is genuine about Krishna consciousness, and like you said, not counting any previous samskars, just somebody new, so to speak, their own genuineness about it is the first thing. If that's not really there, there's some minor impressions from their just idea of being attracted to Krishna consciousness, but it certainly may not be enough to hold them to the true growth in Krishna consciousness, which means they won't have Krishna consciousness per se to show as something that changed their lives or made them better. And therefore the persons who either doubted it or were actually outright antagonistic towards it can now see some positive benefit. So that's something that is really a matter of time. And it's really not something necessarily will be reconciled at the time that the division is going on, but it's something that proves itself down the line. Now, of course, circumstances are there that if the person is a minor, then you're really in a quandary because, you know, if you're living in the house of your parents and you're not an adult, you're kind of, you know, that's karmic, right? And you're gonna have to kind of tate ono kompam, right, with that, right? And the point being here is that if the sanskars and bhakti were not praktana sanskars, right, where you actually had some substantive inner drive, then pretty much it'd be fleeting anyway, because then even though there was a notion about going to bhakti, as soon as any other opportunity presents itself, yeah, I want to go off and join a rock band or whatever it might be, that'll be the next iteration of trying to escape the circumstances, right?
That's perfect. And so, okay, now we come to in the Bhagavad Gita and Srila Gurudev and Ramananda Rai, we hear many examples where Mahaprabhu, for example, says that don't give up monk renunciation, consider your worldly duties and then come back. Well, I'll call you back myself, basically. In the Bhagavad Gita, it says that, sorry for not quoting scripture in its essence, but to paraphrase that, you should follow your worldly duties whilst kind of continuing with Krishna consciousness and giving everything that you have onto me, is just one of the examples that is written in the Gita. And then you have the examples of our acharyas who themselves in their own lives have done the same thing. So my question is that someone that is you know, is going through this motion of Krishna consciousness, has this kind of wants to kind of give up everything because they're at a stage where, or they're in a position where they feel like they want to give up everything for Hari Guru Vaishnav, but they have attachment to their family, etc. So they're kind of in this one step in Krishna consciousness, one foot in Krishna consciousness, one foot in material life, and they're trying to really balance the two together and trying to walk in that path. And they're more lenient to one side, which is Krishna conscious, but they can't leave their the other side because they have some attachment. What would you say in that circumstance or in that position to someone that's facing those issues?
That's kind of the verse we started with. Markata vairagya na deke kare lokan. The part of that verse is also antra nishtakara bhaya lokya vyavihari. Total Raghunath Das Goswami. Don't do monkey renunciation, where even though it appears that you're very renounced, inwardly there still may be so much samsari tendency there, but for any external reasons you want to present yourself as being renunciated, don't do that. That was Mahaprabhu's instruction. But rather, inwardly, antra nishtakara, that inwardly in your Hridoy Mandir, you should develop deep bhajan life. And organically, especially in the stage of ruchi, tat bhavadi madhure shuti dirpakshite, in this stage, naturally and organically, a taste will develop. And that taste in bhakti is what will remove the tendency for jadras, right? What is this thing? Raso vrajam rasopiyasya param drishya nivartate. That when there's param drishya, a superior taste, which is genuinely coming from bhakti, from the influence of Swarup Shakti, then naturally the giving up of jad ras will take place, the tendencies for enjoyment in the material world and all of that. Mentally conceiving or trying to mentally create that is actually one of the 6 stages of Anustita Bhakti, which is Vyudavikalpa, right? I really want to be renounced, I really want to be, but I really have some attachment over here. And so that back and forth is Vyudavikalpa, right? So that is not what we want. Therefore, it's been established how to navigate properly. If there's any tendency towards material life, the Grihastha Ashram, therefore it's called an ashram. The Grihastha Ashram will provide shelter. If you have griha medi, in other words, if you have sense-enjoying tendencies in your mind, the grahastha life will not provide an ashram for you, because you cannot shelter the tendency for sense gratification. But if you have a genuine desire for bhakti, but the impressions from your previous births, everything, are giving you also some tendency towards material enjoyment, then grahastha life will give you an ashram. Because in an ashram, the center of the ashram life is Thakurji, and the grahastha family, they consider themselves the sevak of Thakurji in that ashram. You understand? So it will help to organically grow properly to the stage of renunciation.
Would you be able to break down what a grihastha life looks like for those that don't know how it would look like, or what it's been described as? Because when we speak about a grihastha life, we just kind of have this, I say we, people, everyone, I don't know, have this concept that grihastha life is just a family life and that's it. But there's so much to that, and a grihastha life in itself, a grihastha ashram, like you said, it's a place for us to stay. For those that are following that line, it's important to know what is a grihastha ashram for them to be able to follow it properly. So would you be able to just kind of give some examples of that?
Yes. So we are not, in common parlance, we say we're grahastha. So graha means house, sta means to be situated. So we're really not grahastha. We're grahastha ashram, right? We're situated in a house which we have created into an ashram. And ashram life is centered around Thakurji. Just like there's no Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur did not preach Vanashram Dharma. They preached Daivi Vanashram Dharma, right? That through the various stages of life, Bhagavan should be the focus. So in Grahastha life, or Grahastha Ashram life, Bhagavan is the focus. Guru, Hari Guru Vaishnav Seva is the focus, right? And the sort of natural byproduct of living in family life, there's a natural kind of enjoyment that comes. Natural kind of enjoyment, not artificial. And if it is structured around Sastra and following the rules, regulations of Sastra, it can become very happy. So it becomes happy life also. Now, this is a very deep understanding here. Vairagya is not a product of the external body. Vairagya is a product of the heart. When bhakti has influence in the heart very deeply, it causes a natural detachment. That detachment is not external, it's internal. So whether you're in Grahastha life, whether you're in Vairagi life, whatever you are, that taste in the service of Hari Guru Vaishnav, if it becomes very prominent in your heart, it is called Vairagya, Visesh Anurag. A special kind of attachment to bhajan life, that is called Vairagya. Whatever ashram you're situated in, right? Because as soon as you want to chant Anik in the morning, first thing you do is say Naham Vipro Nanarapachye, right? You go to Bhuta Suddhi, I'm not any of these things anyway. You understand? So if you're reaffirming every day while chanting Anik that actually I am the Das, Anudas, right? Then I'm not these things anyway. But externally, in navigating properly by previous impressions, I may have entered Grahastha life. And in the maturation in Grahastha life, natural, organic Vairagya will take place, because Vairagya is the influence of Bhakti Shakti. It's not a mental decision. Okay, let me see, what time is it? I'm 50 now. So it's maybe I should put on saffron or something. Or maybe, so it's not that kind of calculation. That's in the category of Vikalpa. The organic absorption in bhajan life that's become mature, that's called renunciation. That is called Vairagya. If I'm in Grahastha life, if by some circumstances I've entered into brahmachari, vanaprast, or sannyas life, naturally it should happen. And for many grahastas who are, been grahasta for a while, Gurudev told us to take vanaprast. This was 20 something years ago, right? So, if husband and wife truly have affection for each other, then they have each other's best welfare in mind. So Gurudev asked that you should take vanaprast, and asked my wife, or you should support your husband and preach with your husband. So I am so much affection, means pretty lakshan, like Rupa Goswami described, because in the material world, mundane idea of love is mundane, right? Kaitavam rahitam prema, na prema manushaloke. In the material world is not real love, but Rupa Goswami said that the 6 qualities of exchanges between Vaishnav, so husband and wife or Vaishnav, Vaishnavi, right? They're called Priti Lakshan. They have the quality of Priti because Bhagavan is the center. So I have so much affection for my wife because she's dedicated to following what Gurudev asked.
Yeah.
You understand? So this is natural. So no, even Gurudev once, devotees asked about me taking sannyas, because one devotee asked, oh, Mukunda, maybe because I preached in Africa, and they were going to South Africa at that time. That's what it was. He said, oh, maybe Mukunda can take sannyas. And Gurudev says, no need to take sannyas. In other 2 things, Gurudev was one, he didn't want to implant in my mind this idea, okay, now start thinking, maybe I'll become a sannyasi, right? Because then it will become Viruvikampa again. Because the consideration is about me. And any development that had taken place up to that point in genuinely deepening a sense of bhajan life starts to become more subsumed by the idea of what is going to be my external status. You understand?
Yeah.
So no need,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and actually it's quite important because there's actually quite a lot of Grihastha families out there. The majority of now devotees are from a Grihastha ashram, or are trying to develop into a Grihastha ashram, and it's really important to know why you're joining that ashram and not joining another ashram, and what it takes to be in that ashram. Because if Krishna isn't the center, and I'm learning this now, is that our ashram doesn't really work. Our ashram is very yeah. I mean, anyone that knows my husband knows that he's like a proper Paka Vaishnav. So if there is anything that is opposite to that in our house, then it just doesn't work, and it means that Krishna is the center of Gurudev's our center. Gurudev's given us everything that we need, and Krishna, and you start to learn that. And I've seen in my previous home, as before I was married, is Krishna consciousness was not an apparent thing in our home, and it was, even though I'm from an Indian background, Krishna wasn't ever known as a prominent God in our home. My brother decided, Krishna consciousness was the way, and he spoke to me and my little sister. And when we first started, it was very difficult for us to be in that home. But then now, like if you see my family home now in England, you've got deities of Thakurji, and my mum worships them, my dad looks after them, they serve Vaishnavas, and it's that consistency of being strong-minded that we're going to be Krishna conscious. We're not going to let anything affect that. Gurudev will help us in that process. And I want to ask you a question regarding, okay, so when someone's now making a decision that, okay, I'm going to go into a Grihastha life, or I'm going to go into a Brahmachari life, or whatever, they're the main 2 when they first start off, I guess, when they're deciding what, some might be very lucky, they might go straight into Vanprastha or what considerations do they need to make when they're going into that? Do they need to consider stuff like their relationships with their family members? I know that you've spoken about the giving up potency and viragya, should I say? But what should one consider when they are deciding or deciding on what kind of life they go, because you sometimes do get pressured into doing things that you don't probably want to do because you think it's this scripted way of doing it, or the scriptures say it and you have to do it. But like you said, we've just discussed that not everyone's Krishna consciousness falls into a that kind of box, but they need to be in a wider kind of box. So what would you say?
There's like two levels of consideration. One is a gauging of your own maturation in bhakti, because if there's not some maturation level in bhakti, it'll be some difficulty in navigating any ashram, right? Because this is why Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur Pad mentioned the 6 things of Anushtita Bhakti. It was to give us a clear template for what goes on in the psychology while we're trying to develop. So those stages like Utsamai, Ganatara, etc., are real things. They're not just like written in a book. So those are actually internal psychological things that are going on in somebody who's trying to grow in bhakti. So you need to have in any ashram to be settled and steady some level of maturation. For some reason, it's become, I don't know, socially connotated that, well, if you feel some disturbance, just join the Grihastha ashram. That's like the furthest thing from the truth.
Yeah.
So the idea should be in some kind of bhakti maturation, but a understanding of your own nature and perhaps seva considerations. Yourself and Bhikkhuni Hari Prabhu, what a powerful team of seva. So perhaps Prabhuji, in setting the standard of what is great Grihastha life, may help so many devotees that may not have been helped in the same way just by if he took sannyas.
Yeah.
You understand? It's a very deep thing. Because service is paramount. Right? Same things may apply, right? It's not that, oh, well, you'll have a different level of enjoyment, right? A mini sannyasi is also traveling, very nice places to stay, very nice prasad, so much honor, respect. So if there's no maturation in that ashram, same things could plague or haunt them. You understand? So every ashram requires this level of maturation in bhakti to some degree. So Grihastha life also same. That on another thing, one big thing that's different about Grihastha life is where you'll find somebody maybe spiritually mature, they have no ability to navigate the material world.
Yeah.
That also causes problems in Grihastha life, right? There's many devotees who are very nice devotees, but probably not good potential husbands or wives because they have no consideration of material responsibility. And that is a feature of Grihastha life. I will have to work. I will have to take care of a family. I'll have to navigate how to balance that as we're having this whole discussion with my bhajan life, how to maintain, how to manage my time, etc. You understand? So if there's no maturation in that, also any ashram you're in will be problematic, but Grihastha ashram also will be very problematic because now it's even more important that you have enough maturity to balance being materially responsible and spiritually maintaining responsibility to grow.
Yeah.
You know, in fact, this is one of the things that I wish I saw more of. That there are many nice young devotee men and women, but a lot of times the difficulty in them being able to come together successfully as grihasthas is that there's a little bit of imbalance in how to navigate the material side, right?
Yeah, no, it's so important because actually when you're in a family environment, let's say if there was a child involved in that, it's about nourishing that child physically as well as spiritually. And if someone's not able to provide that, and then it does cause problems, and you don't want that to, even though you want Krishna to be the center of that, and you can teach it, but there's some basic foundational things that you require for that to take place, and for it to be an environment for grihastha ashram, and you know, like a man's responsibility, a husband's, should I say, not a man's, but a husband's responsibility towards their wife and their family is massive. They take 50%, a wife takes 50% of whatever. Now, I'm going to say I'm very lucky in that matter, but whatever the husband does, you know, the wife is eligible for that 50% of that bhakti, you know, the bhajan that they've done. And it's important for him, for the husband, to be in a position that he's able to not only guide himself, but also his family members along with him. And it's important for the wife to be able to encourage him enough to be able to stay on that track. Because it can be really easy to divert someone and take them out of Krishna consciousness by simply wanting some mundane gains. And, you know, it's really important to find that balance. It's really, really important, both aspects. And I'm, you know, before you're married, you kind of have this concept that, don't worry, it's my money, it's my life, it's my kind of situation. I don't have no one else to worry about. Then you get married and you're kind of like, oh, I've got someone else to look after. I have to consider I have to consider their health. I have to consider that. And I think it's a subject matter that is very underspoken about, and it's really important to have.
That's why there has to be really, really pragmatic conversations that go on when there's considerations. If they're arranged marriages, a lot of that may be factored in because people come together as a family and do it. But in marriages that are not directly family arranged and so forth, still the potential spouses have to have real serious pragmatic conversations, not just about the fact that there may be mutual attraction and so forth and so on, but that how will we manifest practical life that will nourish bhakti, because there's pragmatics involved. Are you going to move from your place to my place? Are you planning on working? What if you do work, what are your aspirations? I mean, a lot of practical consideration. When and how many children are we going to have? Oh, I mean, it's a very serious thing. And that conversation has to go on. It can't be hidden by the nature of the mutual attraction and the happiness of the mental picture of marriage, right? And then we never talk about that. And then it starts to surface later on, afterwards. Yeah. So yeah, I have to have those very, very serious talks. Now, that's a little difficult for very, very young people, especially if they're both young in bhakti and young in life, because maybe both of those things haven't fully kicked in yet. So, I mean, it's important. It's important.
And in terms of like when we're speaking about a husband and wife, or they're going to two people that are going to get married, how important is it for them to actually know their duties as a wife, a potential wife or a potential husband? Because a lot of people, again, don't know what their responsibilities are when they're going around the fire sacrifice and taking 7 steps or 7 rounds or whatever it is. People don't actually know their responsibility on both sides, because half the time it's spoken in a fast tone, or no one's really explained it to them, and no one's given them that consideration. So how would you, sorry, let me say this properly, what would you say would be important for them to understand about that?
I think that's part of those pre-conversations, because there is the dharmic side of the equation, which according to dharma, the duties of a husband and the duties of a wife, there are dharmic responsibilities set in sastra. Then there are pragmatics to be considered, right? Which may be based on circumstances, because dharmically, things may be able to be fit in a certain nice package. But in pragmatics, it may, for instance, it may be that a wife and husband both have to work, because we're navigating the world as it is, not as we would like it to be ideally for our Vedic marriage, right? So maybe husband and wife have to work. So then other considerations come in. because if husband and wife have to work, that means duties like cooking may have to be shared. That means that duties like cleaning may have to be shared, right? Or that also may mean there may be a great deal of tolerance around how the fact that it's not going to always be as neat or as clean, right? Etc. So all of these things, the arrangement of takuji saver.
Yeah.
On some days that I still have to do some training or something, my wife will do the takuji save in the morning. And, then I'll put takuji to rest in the evening, or vice versa, right? But then if she puts takuji to rest in the evening, then I'll have to make sure that the kitchen has been cleaned. You understand? So we have to balance the duties, right? And we're in retired life, and we still have to balance duties, right? So these are serious things, because also, if those things are not discussed, we could romanticize the entire relationship, and then when the realities come out, it causes problems.
Yeah.
So better to have mature conversations about the pragmatics as well. You can't account, we're not Jyotish by design, so it's not we're going to see everything, right? But we can have some idea. Okay, if I'm going to be living in this place, this is what's required. And like my wife, when she sold her practice in Baltimore and we moved to Florida, it meant if she wanted to practice dentistry here with her own practice, she would have to now go back to a whole schooling and get recertified. So obviously in our later years, this is not something we wanted to do. What would it be, sweetie? She would have to take the boards again. That means the academic qualifications, which is not easy, right? In dentistry in America. So she elected that she would work for the state, and doing that, she was able to not have to do that. And then she was able to retire from the state here. So I'm just saying, and even when we first got married, she owned her own dental practice, whereas I work for a sort of government agency. So her ability to navigate things like, if she arrived at her job late, she's the boss. If I go there late, I have an issue, right? So she elected to move from her home to my home because, so I'm pointing these things out because there are pragmatics involved.
Yeah.
And that has to be discussed and worked out, right?
I think it's a really important thing for both sides, both sides of the party to speak about, because like you said, romanticizing about what your life will be like as a Krishna conscious couple, or whatever idea or concept you have, but then when reality can hit, and it can hit really hard, you start to kind of, I've seen it in many couples that have kind of joined forces together, is that the idea of what they thought was married life is nowhere near what married life is. And and that, other people that are involved in that marriage also, especially if you're from an Indian family, there's other family members that are involved, etc. So it's really important to have those ideas laid out on the ground, so you have an idea and you're actually living in a reality rather than a fantasy of what your marriage is gonna look like. And I think on top of that, the main thing is that you both know that you're dedicated to Sri Krishna and Hari and Guru. I think if that's not there from whatever time you've been speaking to them, and I think you can get a concept or an idea of someone's relationship with Sri Guru or Hari from when you're speaking to them, like and then that kind of gives you an idea of where they are consciously as well, because you can pretend to be someone for a certain amount of time, but then eventually your natural self will come out. So I think it's those conversations, it's really important to be yourself, and people will accept you for being yourself and being honest. Like Gurudev would say to all of us, it doesn't matter what you are, but just be honest. It doesn't matter. Like, you could be the worst of the worst, but just be honest about it. Then I can help you. Yeah,
exactly. It's
a very simple concept that a lot of people don't know how to do. And that in itself is another whole subject, so maybe we can speak about that another time. But the other thing that I wanted to ask you, so if someone now is, let's put ourselves in another situation. Someone's recently got married, one person's Krishna conscious, their partner is not Krishna conscious, doesn't really believe in God. Somehow their relationship works. What would you say to, or help to support? What would you do, or what would you recommend for the person that is Krishna conscious to help support their partner in growing in Krishna consciousness?
Yeah, I think that's always going to be a really unstable situation. It may not appear so on the surface, because depending on the degree of in Srimad Bhagavatam in the 12th canto, there's one statement is in describing the nature of Kali Yuga. It is called Abhiruchi. Abhiruchi means a superficial attraction. So sometimes a superficial attraction can have such power that people coming under the sway of that superficial attraction, because if the core person, especially in bhakti, your core identity is as a bhakta or bhaktin, right? It would be very difficult to navigate existence with somebody that's not their core. But the superficial attraction can cover that. This is one of the features of Maya, that's covering potency. It can cover that in such a way that the attraction becomes so strong that it's kind of keeping under wraps, so to speak, the core issue of incompatibility that's there, right? Now, it may only take a stimulus to ignite the fact that at the core, you're very different. It could be one thing, like somebody wanted to do something. Well, I really don't want to do that. Plus, it's against my religion. Well, wait a minute with this religious thing. I don't have to believe. You understand? And it turns into a whole thing. So it's not impossible, but it should be recognized that the core of your being is what's coming together with someone else, not Abhiruchi means your material self-conception and then the material conception with that person. That's not what's coming together, because the Atma is still present. So as soon as there is an opportunity and the modes of nature, they don't stay static. So there will be a point when something will rise up that will stimulate bringing out that difference, that at your core value, you're different. So now if that person, because in many cases, obviously a person who has some level of devotion would not have married somebody who's an outright atheistic demon, so to speak, right? But there may be somebody who accommodates the idea of your being Krishna conscious, but that has no interest in it themselves. Now, it could be for a number of reasons. Maybe they have other spiritual interests. Maybe they have no spiritual interest, but they're just mode of goodness and they can accommodate your being in bhakti. But again, until some core level of depth comes in that relationship, it's not really very stable, because there's so many influences that can come to create havoc in a situation like that, because we don't have as our core understanding something mutual. One of the things that's very strong in bhakti is that there's a core understanding of mutual seva to Hari Guru Vaishnava. So we could have a disagreement about many things, but the core thing is, yeah, we both agree to this, right? We may not even agree how to do it, but we both agree to this. But if the core value is different, that can be really, I don't know, very unsteady ground. Now, your question was, though, what can be done about it? One is that the person who is in a position of devotional standing has to grow in that devotional standing. The methodology by which you influence your partner, though, will be different from person to person. Because I personally saw that there was one friend of ours who, as she was growing in devotion, she was trying to influence the husband. And the husband was gradually coming along and growing. But as she intensified the pace, okay, now you have to come, at a certain point, it's like rebellion, like, wait a minute, I have my own life, I have my own thoughts, I have my own. So at that point, it kind of backfired, and the attempt to push influence turned into pushing away. So being steady in your own self and allowing the prabhav, the influence of your steadiness in your own growth to become something that radiates to a partner who's not there, and let them organically become attracted, is going to be the only true means of them coming to a level where you're mutually together. If you force it, or even this is a case where somebody may really like somebody on the basis of external things, right? So they're willing to accommodate Krishna consciousness, right? But they never really take an interest in it themselves. Then that's, if they don't gradually grow from your influence, the relationship will never be stable. It'll never be stable. Understand? If they do, however, see your growth, and then they organically start to appreciate Krishna consciousness to the point where if you did break up, they would stay in Krishna consciousness, that's a hopeful relationship. You know what I mean? In other words, if they grow to a point where even if you left them, they would stay with Krishna consciousness, now there's been some significant growth.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think we've got time for one more question, if that's okay, and then we'll have to like call you back in, or if that.
Yeah.
I think it's 10:30 your time there, right?
Whoa.
Is it?
I didn't realize time had gone like that.
I'm just looking at the clock now, and I'm like, oh, it's that time. But I just want to if it's okay to just ask one more question.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So one thing that is really important when you're kind of living in this life is your association that you keep.
Mm-hmm.
And we've heard in Shastra, the association you keep influences you. And I just want you to speak a little bit about that and why it's important to have certain type of association, and what kind of, for someone that's grown up with friends for decades, that are not Krishna conscious, they kind of do the opposite of what Krishna consciousness is. What would you say for someone that's known that person, and how important is it to have the right type of association, and what is the right type of association for someone that's trying to develop in Krishna consciousness? Sorry, that's loads of questions. That wasn't one.
Ideally, Swajatya Snigdha Mahatra Sadhu Sangha is the ideal. That those who have natural affection for us, who have the same goal as we have, and who are more elevated. This is ideal association. Now coming down from this ideal standard, those who are in pursuit of that same kind of Sangha, they are also helpful. Coming down from that, those who are not opposed to us seeking that kind of Sangha, they can also be tolerated. Coming down from that, we get to the borderline where our dealings with those persons beyond the support of us moving forward will have to be vyavyaharik. Then when you enter the category, vyavyaharik here means externally dealing with them, because they can't enter the internal space we have in terms of our pursuit in bhakti. So now coming into the external space, we deal with them according to how much of a negative influence they would have on bhakti. There may be somebody who they have no interest in Krishna consciousness. They're completely desiring for material things and all of that, but they don't drink, smoke, have other negative influences. That's one kind of dealing. There's another person who has no interest in Krishna consciousness, and they drink, smoke, have bad habits. They're, promiscuous in their activities, and they want you to become part of that and hang out with it. Yeah, no. Right? So, so it's like a scale. There's like a graded scale of association. Ideally, always a high class of sadhu sangha. Then those who are maybe our equal, who nourish us in appreciating that high class of sadhu sangha. Those who are not opposed to us seeking sadhu sangha. Those who may be neutral, but their habits and their activities don't detract from what it is that we get in sadhu sangha. Then those who are on the spectrum of things that are actually anti the mood of being in sadhu sangha, because they have very bad habits, etc., etc. Now, in the arena of external dealings, even that person who has so many bad habits and everything, we should not take a stance of antagonism or anything, because that feeling won't help our bhakti. We should take a prayerful mood, I hope that person also will, by grace of Guru and Krishna, be blessed somehow to come from that position.
That's perfect. That's actually, I think it's really important because we deal with so many people and so many emotions on a daily basis, and it's important to know how to approach with a soft mood, that because Hari, Guru and Vaishnava are also very soft, and also technically Krishna is in everyone's heart, so actually
Yes.
and from that perspective, then we will see that, and that's one way of associating, I guess, in one way. But I think it's really important to acknowledge that everyone is coming from different aspects of their lives because of their karma, the sukriti, etc. Important that there's no like ill feelings towards anyone, and I think that's where there's a very fine line of being not Krishna conscious, even though you're Krishna conscious, because you're discriminating in a not so nice way towards someone that is doesn't know about Krishna consciousness, and so I think that's really important. You put it very nicely, so I really appreciate Prabhuji. And if we're lucky, then I will call you back and you will agree to come back with us on another program where we can either speak about this subject or another subject a little bit further and delve into that, if that's okay.
Sure. I consider it Guru Seva as well, so thank you for engaging me. And tell your good husband, please send me blessings as well as yourself for Guru Nishta and Guru Seva.
I cannot send you no blessings, but I was going to say the reverse back. Definitely the reverse back. It's not the other way around. But you keep us in your blessings. It's really important for us to grow in Krishna consciousness for Srila Gurudev and the Vaishnavas. So you keep us in your blessings, Prabhuji. Just stay on the call for a second. I'm just going to end the live, and then we'll just give me 2 seconds.
All right, Haribol.
Thank you for everyone that's watching. In 2 weeks' time, we'll have another podcast where we will see you soon, and we'll have another wonderful guest with us. Haribol.